So good morning, hello, and welcome to today's webinar on the Kentucky Kids Count Data Dashboard. My name is Corinna Cash, and I am the Data and Research Director here at Kentucky Youth Advocates, as well as the Kids Count Project Lead. We are so excited to have all of you with us here today to celebrate the launch of our annual Kentucky Kids Count data. Over the last 35 or so years, the Kentucky Kids Count Project has strived to make high-quality local-level data both accessible and easy to use so that communities, decision makers, and advocates have the data that they need to make decisions that are best for kids, best for families, and ultimately best for Kentucky. We want to go to the next slide. Before I get started, I just want to give a huge thank you to all of our sponsors, the Kentucky Primary Care Association, the Kentucky United Methodist Children's Home, Cozair for Kids, Save the Children, and then our signature sponsor, Aetna Better Health of Kentucky. This project is so huge and would not be possible without their continued support, so we're very grateful for them. Next slide. So, before we hop in, I want to give a little bit of background on what the Kentucky Kids Count Project is. So Kids Count as a whole is a nationwide initiative of the Annie E. Casey Foundation that seeks to track child well-being across the United States so that local, state, and national level discussions of child well-being have the data they need to identify problems and assess solutions. There is a Kids Count grantee in all 50 states, and Kentucky Youth Advocates is the one for Kentucky. You can learn more about the National Kids Count Initiative and the Annie E. Casey Foundation by visiting their website at aecf.org. Annie E. Casey is also the host of the Kids Count Data Center, where you can find over 50 data points related to Kentucky kids and families that we update regularly at the county, school district, and race level. If you've ever wondered things like what the median family income is in your county or how kids are doing when it comes to topics like chronic absenteeism in your schools, then you're in luck because the data center has those points at the county and school district level, as well as so many more. I also love the data center because it allows you to compare Kentucky data to national trends in other states, so we can see how Kentucky kids are doing in comparison to places like Indiana, Tennessee, and all the way to California. And with that, let's talk about the Kentucky Kids Count Project. Next slide. The Kentucky Kids Count Project tracks child well-being across 4 different domains: economic security, education, health, and family and community. And each domain, as you can see on the screen, has 4 different indicators. All of our data, for the most part, comes from state and federal agencies, such as the Cabinet for Health and Family Services and the U.S. Census Bureau. But we do also get some from national nonprofits like Feeding America. If you're curious where our data comes from or any of the notes about how we process it, a little bit later, my colleague Lauren Bowling will show us exactly how to look at our sources and how we obtain data. So this year, all of the data for these indicators on the screen can be found on the Kentucky Kids Count County Data Dashboard, as well as in the printable county profiles that you will find under the dashboard. We have a profile for all 120 Kentucky counties, and if your county has multiple school districts, the data for every school district will be on that profile. The Kentucky Kids Count County Data Dashboard covers all of the data that you would have found in the book in the previous years, including that county and school district level data for all 16 key indicators. And for select indicators, we also have data by race. The dashboard also includes lots of interactive features such as heat maps and charts that advocates can use to better understand the data and compare their county with surrounding counties. A little bit later in this webinar, my colleague Lauren Bowling will be walking us through the dashboard and all of its features. For now, I'm going to take some time to dive into this year's statewide data trends. So we go to the next slide. And the data trends I'm going to start with is in the economic security domain. The economic security domain includes our indicators around children living in a household with a high rental cost burden, children living in food insecure households, children in low-income households, and children in poverty. You can see county level data for all of these on our data dashboard at kyouth.org. So when it comes to economic security, a child's access to basic needs such as quality housing, food, and enough income to cover their basic needs is really the foundation to their health and development. When children's basic needs are not met, almost every other indicator that we will see on this dashboard suffers as a result. Critical to meeting these basic needs is a parent's access to financial resources, and factors like high housing cost and grocery cost can make it difficult for parents to afford everything a family needs to thrive. In order to afford housing, food, childcare, and other necessities, most Kentucky families need to make an income of at least 200% of the federal poverty line. In Kentucky, 44% of children live below this line and often struggle to afford their basic needs. Living below this line puts families at risk of food and housing insecurity, where we see over 1 in 5 Kentucky kids, or 21.1%, live in a food insecure household, and 45% of kids live in a household with a high rental cost burden. We saw a big spike this year in children experiencing food insecurity. Like I said, with over 1 in 5 children living in a food insecure household in 2023. And 119 out of Kentucky's 120 counties experiencing worse rates of food insecurity than in 2021. Moving on to the next slide. So moving to our education domain, we cover data around kindergartners ready to learn, 4th grade students proficient in reading, 8th grade students proficient in math, and high school students graduating on time. As with the economic security indicators, you can view statewide and school district level data for this on the dashboard. Education is critically important for the long-term well-being and economic prospects of a child. The importance of education starts really young, with the most critical time for brain development being during that first 5 years of a child's life. This year, we were concerned to see a drop in the number of kindergartners ready to learn, with only 46% of kindergartners entering school at that ready-to-learn threshold. We know that there are many factors contributing to this, including the cost and availability of childcare programs, blocking families out of those really important benefits that childcare programs can provide. During the 2024-25 school year, we also saw 2 indicators improve and 1 stay the same. Both 8th grade students proficient in math and high school students graduating on time improved. However, there's a bit of a good news, bad news on that situation, especially with that 8th graders students proficient in math. Last school year, 40% of 8th graders were deemed proficient in math. And while we're delighted to see that that's improved, it's also extremely concerning that only 2 out of 5 8th graders in Kentucky are scoring at that minimal standard of proficiency in math. Moving to our next domain. So our health domain covers data related to smoking during pregnancy, low birth weight babies, children under 19 with health insurance, and teen births. Good health begins before a child is even born, and many chronic diseases that impact adults start in pregnancy and early childhood. This year, we saw lower rates of teen births, children under 19 with health insurance, and smoking during pregnancy. We were particularly excited about the smoking during pregnancy indicator because all 120 Kentucky counties saw improved rates in this indicator compared to 2016 to 18. Additionally, we saw the teen birth rate drop from 28.2 per 1,000 to 21 per 1,000, which really continues this promising downward trend that we've seen in this indicator over the past couple of years. While we're excited to see that so many of these indicators drop, we did see a slight increase in the number of low birth weight babies born. While a relatively small increase, this is an indicator we will be tracking closely over the next couple of years to ensure it does not increase further. We know that babies born at a low birth weight are at an increased risk of both short and long-term complications, such as breathing problems as infants and long-term developmental disabilities. Moving to our final domain, our family and community domain covers births to mothers without a high school degree, children in foster care, children exiting foster care to reunification, and children living in high poverty neighborhoods. The high poverty neighborhoods indicator is a returning indicator and replaces the children incarcerated in the juvenile justice system, data point we've had in past years. The neighborhood and family a child grows up in plays a powerful role in shaping their development and life opportunities. This section looks at family and neighborhood factors that make it more likely that a family will be separated, have difficulty accessing needed resources, or experience high levels of stress. I was especially excited to talk about this domain because, as you can see, we saw improvements in all 4 of our indicators. This is something to celebrate because we know how damaging these systems and community factors can be to youth. On births to mothers without a high school degree, we saw a decrease from 13.6% to 12.2%. We saw a decrease in the number of children entering the foster care system, with 39.4 per 1,000 youth being in the foster care system. At the same time as we saw that decrease in children entering the foster care system, we also saw an increase of children exiting foster care to be reunified with their families, with over 1 in 3 youth in 2022 to 2024 being reunited. Then we want to go to the next slide. So that covers all of our domains, but in addition to those 16 core indicators, we like to use Kids Count as an opportunity to explore a pressing issue impacting Kentucky kids and kind of get a more granular look at the county level on how that issue is impacting kids throughout the state. This year, we chose to focus on obesity and how access to healthy foods at the school and community level can reduce rates. Whenever I first started working on this highlight, I had not seen the food insecurity data yet, but seeing the obesity and food insecurity data point that we talked about earlier together, we found what we think to be a pretty significant juxtaposition, which is that in Kentucky, 1 in 5 kids are obese, while 1 in 5 kids are also food insecure. This juxtaposition is significant because food insecurity and hunger can be a really silent problem here in Kentucky. Often, whenever we picture food insecurity, we picture malnutrition or more extreme forms, which just isn't what it looks like here. In Kentucky, food insecurity can often look like parents skipping meals so that their kids have enough food to eat, families choosing between medical and utility bills or groceries, or families having to rely on cheap, ultra-processed foods to feed their family, and foods that are closely associated with obesity. This over-reliance on ultra-processed foods is part of why we chose to focus on food access and how it contributes to obesity, because we know that whether it's because of poverty or a lack of nearby grocery stores, many Kentucky kids simply do not have access to the foods that they need to maintain a healthy weight. For many kids, this lack of access starts at the neighborhood level. The neighborhood a child grows up in, and specifically the proximity to a grocery store within that neighborhood, can strongly influence their access to healthy foods. Research shows that kids who live in high poverty, low food access neighborhoods are more likely to be obese than their peers who live in higher income neighborhoods with easier access to grocery stores and supermarkets. This increased risk of obesity starts young too. One recent study found that children living in high poverty neighborhoods with limited food access during pregnancy and early childhood had a 50% higher risk of obesity from early childhood to adolescence. As you'll see in the data, a lot of kids throughout both rural and urban areas of the state are living in high poverty neighborhoods. 31% of Kentucky kids live in a high poverty neighborhood, but this number can vary significantly. For example, over half of children in Boone County live in an area with both low incomes and low food access, while 3 out of 4 kids in Robertson County live in a low-income, low food access area. While the data around food insecurity and obesity can be troubling, what has really stood out to me whenever I was diving in and researching this space is the amount of incredible work, innovative ideas, and promising practices that Kentucky communities are using to increase access to healthy foods, and ensure kids have what they need to maintain a healthy weight. We're gonna go to the next slide. One example that we feature on the dashboard is schools. Kids spend a significant amount of their day in schools, and schools have also been found to be a significant source of healthy meals for them. Research has found that some of the healthiest meals consumed by children in their day-to-day lives are coming from the school cafeteria. In Kentucky, we're lucky that almost every school participates in something called the Community Eligibility Provision, which the Community Eligibility Provision allows high poverty schools to serve meals to all children for free. That is a huge win that so many schools had the ability to serve meals for free through this program, because without it, we know a significant number of food insecure children would be locked out of those healthy meals that schools provide for breakfast and lunch. For example, in Trimble County, almost 2 out of 3 food insecurity children would not have access to healthy school meals because they live in families that make too much to receive traditional school meal assistance. In Campbell County, over half of all food insecure children would not have access for the same exact reason. Beyond schools, at the community level, we also highlight farmers markets as a vehicle to expand access to locally grown healthy foods. Many farmers markets across Kentucky have farmers market nutrition programs specifically designed to expand access to those local healthy foods for low-income families. One example we talk about on the dashboard is the Double Dollars program, which doubles the value of SNAP benefits when those SNAP benefits are spent at farmers markets. So to learn more about these connections between obesity and access to healthy meals at the school and neighborhood level, as well as learn more about how kids in your community are impacted, you can visit the Kentucky Kids Count Data dashboard. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to my colleague, Lauren Bowling, who's going to walk through that dashboard, give us a little bit more information on how to use it and some of the county data trends we see.
Hi, everyone. I'm Lauren Bowling, a data and research analyst with Kentucky Youth Advocates. Let me go ahead and start sharing my screen. Okie dokie. If anybody has any problems seeing this, let me know. Like Corinna said, we're really excited to have you all here to go into the details about our data dashboard. There have been some changes from last year's dashboard, including the new data point that Corinna went over and a new layout. Now, given the format this year, the dashboard is best viewed in full screen. And like Corinna also said, the new data point is children living in high poverty neighborhood, which replaced the youth in the juvenile justice system. Okay, so the first little bit of a tutorial here is how to get this thing to full screen. If you come up here in the right-hand corner, there's these 3 little buttons. You can download the slides here as well, which will, I think you can do a JPG, a PNG, and a PDF. And then here, if you click on it, it'll come to a full screen. And then on this first slide, we'll have some of the things that you'll see as you move around the dashboard. You can use the drop-down menus here to choose between the state and counties and compare year-over-year values. The maps will let you see either the latest data by county or whether the county is doing better or worse, as well as compare between counties around the state. Maps can also be zoomed in, which is incredibly helpful with some of the counties having multiple very small school districts. Call-out icons are also present on each page, and they will be moving slightly, so hopefully that they are a little bit more visible. These have additional information about the data that you'll see, such as the source, any notes, and any meaning of some symbols that you may run across. And at the bottom, we have our domain shortcuts. So if there's something you really are in a tear to see, you can click on any of these buttons and it will take you directly to that section. Before we move on, are there any questions, concerns? Okay. Let's see here. Then off we go. Okay. So on this page, we have our county data snapshots. This is where we have all the data points for the latest and baseline data for each county in the state. It's a super quick way to get all the information about your county of interest at one time. And you'll also be able to see whether a county has gotten better, worse, or stayed the same for any given data point. A note on the education table. You will need to scroll no matter which county you choose in order to see all of the different indicators and the different school districts that are in a given county. Unfortunately, that's the way it ended up turning out. And something else here we can demonstrate are the call buttons, or the call out buttons, excuse me. So let me pull up Campbell County. Where did you go? There you are. And if we scroll down to Southgate Independent School District, I'm not picking on you, I swear. Let's see, there we go. You'll notice we have some symbols here, the S plus, the NA, and the little tilde symbol here. So if we come up here to the call out button, you'll notice that it's got for each indicator what you might find there and what it means. In this case, the S plus and all of the indicators means that the data was suppressed by the source. The NA means we weren't able to calculate the change because some of the data was suppressed. And in the case of the high school students graduating on time, the tilde symbol means that this district has no high school. Now, a note is that these will vary by domain. And so like just because you see one doesn't necessarily mean it's going to be the exact same in every single one. Okay. Does anybody have any questions on this slide? Okie dokie. Moving on to our race and ethnicity data that is available. This is all we are able to get, and we try to get as much as we can because we know that there are disparities in a lot of areas in the country, including Kentucky. This first table has the breakdown by state and by county of each racial and ethnic group that is tracked from the US Census. You can use the scroll bar here to scroll through and browse the counties, or there is also a search bar up at the top where you can type one in if you have a specific one that you want to see. Oops, there we go. I am not typing today. Okay. Our second graph shows all of the well-being data points that we have racial data for. Unfortunately, they don't all have them. The other thing is that since different organizations use different criteria to classify the race and ethnicity, these categories aren't always comparable to each other. Looking at the first visible indicator, the children living in poverty, you'll see there's 4 categories here. But if we move over to the next one, the kindergartners ready to learn, you'll see there's a significantly more categories available. The reason is that the children in poverty is collected by the US Census Bureau at the federal level, and the kindergartners ready to learn is collected by the state at the Kentucky Department of Education. So while you might be tempted to make comparisons between these two categories, it's best if you don't. This bottom the bottom graph is showing the percentages of this across the state of the different races of children. And the good thing about this is it allows you to highlight some disparities between the racial data in the different indicators above here and the general population that we have down here. For instance, the children identifying as 2 or more races in Kentucky is between 4 and 5%. But for children in poverty, we notice that's up to 23%. So using these two to compare with the different data points can give you an idea of where some disparities may lie. Let's see. Okay, pause for any questions. I'm pretty quick on the draw, so you might have to stop me. Okay. Slide 4 showcases the state data trends. These are the same things that Corinna went over, just in graphic form. These show the change over time from the baseline to latest data for each of the indicators that we track. The top slide shows the year-over-year change for all indicators that are measured in percentages. We have quite a few. We can go through and see the different options. And different indicators will have different baseline and recent years, and sometimes we only use a few years compared to like the 5 that we see here. The other data points that we have down here are children in foster care and teen births, which are measured in rate per 1,000 children, which is why we have them in a separate graph, is just to avoid any confusion on the measurements. This final graph shows the baseline and latest measurement displays for each of the indicators measured in a percent, and this actually ties in with this particular graph right here. If you want to see the change over time for the children in foster care and teen births, that's going to be on these tabs right here. I particularly like this because it gives you more of an idea of how things have changed over time as opposed to just one, 2 comparison years. That's just my personal bias. And again, to point out, we've done much better in all of the family and community indicators this year. There's fewer children in foster care. Get over here. Fewer births to mothers without a high school degree, children exiting foster care to reunification. More of them were able to do that, and fewer children living in a high poverty neighborhood. And then next, we go to our county level data. This is where the meat of the presentation is because there's a lot going on here. So the bar graph on the left shows the baseline and latest data points for each indicator. You can utilize the drop-down menu at the top. You can either click through here, or you can grab and drop, and it will change for both of these counties. I will say the education is done by school district though. So when you choose a county up on the economic security indicator, you're going to get that county school district, but you're not going to get the additional school districts that are in that county as well. So the years for the baseline and the latest data are included right here under each of the indicator titles, but they're also going to be down here in the data sources. These have moved to the side of the page just for a little bit easier viewing. So if we move over to the maps, this top map displays the latest data for each county. You can pick the indicator again by scrolling through the top bar up here or by using the drop-down menu. The lower map displays whether counties did better, worse, stayed about the same. And you can also hover over these counties and get the magnitude of how much better or worse that they did. One thing I love about the maps, other than I just like maps in general, is it's sort of easy to see how the state is doing overall. For instance, I know Corinna mentioned the food insecurity here. You can go here and see that, yeah, the better or worse map is not great, but it's one county managed to at least not get worse, which is fabulous at this point. You can also see the magnitude by how each county did. Some of them only had small changes, thank goodness. The other thing is it helps highlight geographic patterns. Like if we go to the high rental cost burden, you'll notice that a lot of these areas, there's going to be major cities where the rental cost burden got worse. O&O over in Pikeville, in northern Kentucky, Jefferson County, and down in Owensboro and Paducah. Sorry, down there. So we'll move on to the education now. Again, this is organized by school district in alphabetical order. And something to note here, like I said, is that the suppression symbols for missing and suppressed data are going to be a little bit different. So if I pull up Anchorage, again, not picking on you, you just have some symbols that are fun to see. We notice, oh, I thought we changed that, my bad. The suppressed data here is a 0 and a plus sign, and then the not having a high school in the district is a 0 with 2 asterisks. So these will be noted in the data sources again on the side of the page. Something I also really like about the maps, again, is the fact that you can zoom. Some of these districts are really, really small. So if you're trying to compare a very tiny district to the surrounding ones, you can zoom in using the buttons on the upper left side of the map and dragging and dropping the map. You have to hover over them to see. So if we keep going in, and then if we scroll up here, you can get a little bit better view of some of the tinier districts up in northern Kentucky. We always go there because there's so many of them in that one small area. To reset the map, there's a little square right below there so you don't have to repeatedly click the mouse and it will pop it back out to its regular view. The legends on these pages or on the maps can be helpful as well. For instance, you can isolate the number of districts that had between 10 and 20% of 8th grade students proficient in math by coming down here and clicking on the bar down here, and it will isolate those for you. We know from the calculations that we have 10 districts, but it's a little bit easier to see sometimes. I will note that on the maps, there are 2 school districts, the Fort Campbell dependent schools and the Fort Knox dependent schools, that will show up in these lower areas, but that's just simply because we don't have any data for them. So I know that was a lot. Does anyone have any questions, thoughts, concerns? Okay. Move on through to our health and family and community section. This is not going to be as intense because the bulk of what we just covered was the technicalities of the dashboard here. Again, here we have the teen births and the children in foster care separated out because they are measured in rate per 1,000 instead of the percentage. And the rates can go over 100, which makes it a little difficult to put on the same graph. You can see that over here in the family and community axis. Family and community axis, which can go up to 140 in the data that we have. There's been improvement in the health domain, which is great news. Even though the levels are a little bit higher than the national rates, every county did much better on smoking during pregnancy, which we can be thankful for. And also, almost every county did better in reducing teen births. So something else I would like to point out here concerns the latest data heat maps. A lot of times we're conditioned to think that more of something is better. So in this case, like having more of something just means there's more of it, not that it's better. So for instance, in the family and community section, we like to see fewer births to mothers without a high school degree, but we like to see more kids exiting foster care to reunification. So the better, I guess, values are going to be on different ends of the legend here. So that's just something to keep in mind as you go through the dashboard and explore. So the final slide is going to be our sources and definitions, if I can get over there. Everybody needs to see that. There we go. If you would like to know where we got all of our information and exactly what it means, this is where you're going to be able to find it. We have the specific definition and the source for every single indicator that we have. And then we also have additional information on the 2 data highlights that Corinna covered and that you can see by visiting the dashboard. I will note that on these 2 different pages, some of these sources are linked directly in the data call out. If you would like to, if you want to visit them, you can click on them there. And at that point, this concludes my portion of the presentation. Does anybody have any questions about the data, the dashboard, anything like that? Go ahead and get out of there.
Or questions about the Kids Comp project generally. We reserved a couple minutes to talk through any questions. You can either drop them in the chat or come off mute if you have some. Okay, well, if there are no questions at the moment, we can move on to our next slide. I will note, though, that as you go through this data and you explore it, if questions come up, things you want to talk about, things you'd like to see within this project, please feel free to reach out to me. And would be happy to answer any questions, talk further about this, anything like that. So we've talked a lot about the Kids Count County Data Dashboard. We've talked about the statewide and county data trends. Now the question you might be wondering is, what do we do with all of this information? So we've outlined a couple of next steps. So the first next step is to go to kyouth.org/Kentucky-kids-counts to view the dashboard and look at how kids in your community, in your county, in your school district are doing. Really take in the data, identify what are bright spots and things to celebrate, but then also where are areas where kids need help, they need improvement, and thinking through what are solutions to improve those data points. And then as a next step to that next step, we would love if you would share this data with your legislator. Go to your local elected officials, your state elected officials, bring the data to them and talk about what kids really need out of your county legislature, your state legislature, the US government. And if you're wondering what are easy ways to get plugged in to especially the state legislative session, then we have a good opportunity coming up for you. We want to go to the next slide, which is our annual Children's Advocacy Week. Children's Advocacy Week this year will be March 2nd through 6th. We will have a day at the Capitol on March 4th where we will be in Frankfort, but we'll be doing events that entire week that help advocates understand the Frankfort landscape, get plugged into what they can do for kids, and how they can make their voices heard. So please save the date for that, and we can't wait to see you in March.